And in order to hit a Pareto optimal outcome, there is a far distance to travel. There is a lot of pain to go through. Being able to start, not just clean paper, but sort of clean org chart, but being able to start over with the structure that is actually targeted at that Pareto optimal point to achieve that lower price structurally. That's the magic and the opportunity, and what I think will change the industry. But it is hard, and it is not one thing or two things, right? And I think that's the important thing to acknowledge.
Hi, this is Steve Lekas from Branch Insurance.
And this is Joe Emison from Branch Insurance, and this is the future of insurance.
This episode is brought to you by Medallia, the market leader in customer and employee experience. Their award-winning SaaS platform, Medallia Experience Cloud, makes all your other applications customer and employee aware. Medallia uses proprietary AI and machine learning to reveal predictive insights that drive powerful business actions and outcomes. Leading insurers like Prudential and Zurich use Medallia to reduce churn, turn detractors into promoters, create in-the-moment cross-sell and upsell opportunities, and drive revenue-impacting business decisions. Learn more at Medallia.com. And the Future of Insurance book series, available exclusively from Amazon or at future-of-insurance.com.
Joe and Steve, thank you for joining me on the show.
Glad to be here.
Good to be here.
And thank you more broadly for joining me for the book. It's awesome to have Branch's story in there.
We're really excited about it, Brian. Love your work, and really happy to have you spend time talking about Branch and telling our story.
Well, so I'm going to ask you to give everyone kind of the high level, like compress your entire mission and story into just a few minutes. But I want to hear that from both of you guys. But I will say, we were talking before recording, and more broadly why I wanted you guys in the book. It's from your InsurTech Connect World Tour presentation in the stop in Ohio. That's when I reached out to Andrew and Mike at InsurTech Ohio. I was like, I got to get them in. How can we make this happen? You are doing something that I think on the surface and maybe the way you guys have been talking about it doesn't sound all that different. It's like, it's bundling, whatever. It's so much deeper than that. And I've kind of been looking as like, where can we find genuine advantaged positions, and not just like, they have a clean sheet of paper, so that's why they get to win. Because everyone's sheet fills up at some point. It's got to go a lot deeper than that. So for me, like, I really, really have been impressed by what you guys are building, and that I think a lot of people might miss why it's so fundamentally different. And actually, it's like super profound. So maybe that sounds too fanboyish, so I'll just stop there. But I genuinely appreciate what you guys are trying to build. You want to tell me, tell the audience what it is Branch is, and what you guys are doing that's different?
Yeah, and Brian, I'd love to even weigh in on the comment you just made. I mean, I think having been in this market a long time, it has, it's very competitive. It's old, it's highly regulated, its customers don't trust it. We predict the future as a business, right? It's complex, if nothing else. And you better be really clear on your wedge, right? What it is that gives you a reason to be valuable to consumers in a different way.
Yeah.
God knows we don't need another Travelers, right? I mean, there's enough of these other companies that look alike.
Yeah.
And so, if that's true, then our belief was there's an ecosystem approach to fulfilling our mission, which I'll give you in a moment, and that you had to do a lot of hard things. But the wedge was always clear, like how we into the market and change everything. And so both Joe and I were doing fine, had been growing our careers before beginning Branch. But the compulsion to come here and do this was because we thought we could make a real difference, because we were really clear on what could be different. So it is, for me, it's a very, that was the start, is we had to really believe we could make a massive impact to go all in.
Yeah.
And so you're not wrong at all. That is the beginning of our story.
Well, you generally tell it really humbly, and that's why I think people who aren't really thinking about what you just said may miss it. But Joe, I'm curious for you. Like, you weren't an insurance guy per se, but you've been doing tech around insurance and data and stuff, kind of into the insurance industry for a while. So maybe you were like a little bit like tainted by it or peripheral to it. But what would lead you to drop everything and start an insurance company?
Well, my career as a tech co-founder and tech executive had been from, I think, where a lot of technologists go, which is you want to be close to cool technology and work on hard technical problems. But I kept running into this blocker that happens a lot, which is I'm in a subpar business. And the arc that I traveled was very much an arc of, if I don't really understand how this is a meaningful business or meaningfully different, I'm going to continue to feel disappointed just personally in my career, because just having something that was technologically interesting was not, just wasn't enough for me. It's just not worth, I think, not worth the time. And so I had worked with Steve several times before, and so he had been one of the smartest executives that I had worked with, throughout my career. And when he came to me and laid out the specific market opportunity that was available, and specifically how we could, we would essentially have an unfair means of producing insurance and an unfair means of distributing insurance, and that there were these, pretty significant opportunities that existed in the market. I was incredibly excited about the business opportunity, and I actually, earlier in my career, I had sold a lot to insurers, mainly home insurers, and lenders. And what I was struck with was how much more dynamic insurance was than lending, at least in the areas that I was in. And I felt very strongly at that point, if I had to do it over again, I would seek a career in insurance because of the dynamic aspect that underlies the business around adverse selection in particular, and around how much great work has been done in data science and in additional acquisition of data over the past now sort of 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's exciting. I actually don't think the startup class pays nearly as much homage to companies like Progressive, for example, as they should, and how much of the groundwork had been laid before. And so all that was very exciting to me as well as an industry.
I think you just made a lot of friends with the listeners when you're like, insurance is just so much more dynamic than lending. Anytime we find an industry that we have some reason we can say like it's cooler than that, that's a big win. So thank you. I hadn't heard the comparison to lending. The best I'd gotten was like doing taxes. Being an accountant is
well,
I heard someone say the opposite.
I should clarify that, like, I think a lot of the underwriting and lending is as dynamic, but we were selling into quality control in lending.
Oh, okay.
And that particular niche in lending is not as dynamic as insurance.
Fair enough.
Well, and Brian, as far as your comparison to doing taxes, I mean, as an insurance company, we do our fair share of taxes.
Yes, that's true. So maybe you just can't escape it. I do want to hit on this, Joe. Your point was really around purpose, right? And seeing that bigger purpose and wanting to feel that, not just doing something cool. Because people might hear like, "Oh, tech, that must be more exciting." And then Steve, it goes back to you have this phrase that I think it's actually in a pull quote in the book about insurance being this noble industry and this noble cause. And like, you talk about purpose and noble, like these are strong words for like you said, like not just being another Traveler, State Farm, whoever. Like, the world doesn't need yet another big insurance company that looks and feels the same. There's something much bigger about it. So I just think it's really interesting that this theme keeps coming up with you guys.
Yeah, Brian, one of my experiences when I had, hundreds of insurance companies as customers in a prior life, having come from a big incumbent myself, at the big incumbent, we had kind of like covered up our paper and we had all our like ideas for how we were going to make gains, and we didn't want anyone else to know. And then when I was, working with many insurers, I was stunned to find that they had pieces of paper that they were covering up too, and it had all the same ideas on it.
Yeah.
And I think like, if I asked you, the vision statement of your company, it was generally, the preferred market provider, profitable growth.
Right.
Right. I mean, like, the mission driven is not typical in insurance, but it always was. Like, it's very rare that you'll find one of these old companies that wasn't started for a particular reason. It's just a really long time ago, and it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
But for us, it was really important that first we had a reason to exist, a reason that we thought our customers would be excited about. And then second, we would define a brand narrative that would support that mission and make it clear to our customers what we were here to do for them. And then we'd build the entire company around that brand, so that if we lived it inside, our customers would feel it and we could fulfill the mission. And I've told you the mission as we work through the book, but the mission is simply stated as to make insurance less expensive so that more people can be insured and included. We believed that, interestingly, every big insurance brand in personal insurance started gaining market share with a price advantage. And so, like, we know, and you can ask anyone who's ever sold a home or car insurance policy, did the people who switched save money? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And so, like, we know it's a price sensitive market. We know that consumers would like to pay less for it. Joe and I had done some early consumer research, and Joe asked the magic wand question, which is, if you have a magic wand, what would you have be different about your home and car insurance? And I think it was like, I don't know, 90% of people would just respond, I wish it were cheaper.
Yeah.
So, like, we're not surprised about this. And insurance is the noble purpose. We don't really think about it because we have it to take for granted and it's required of us. So we think about it in a different frame. But, like, would you buy a house? Would you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars if, once every 7 years, something really bad was going to happen and you'd be out of pocket potentially all of that money?
Yeah.
And so we get to take these risks, but insurance also has a long history of exclusion, right? We call it underwriting, but actually the very first ineligibility was a story around, like, we can't take that risk because we can't price it. And what that's manifested on a macro level is 30 million US drivers don't have insurance.
Yeah.
Right? We left them out. And so, like, we think, insurance as an industry spends a ton on charitable contributions. People don't recognize it. Muni bonds, like how we're regulated, also means that we're funding a lot of infrastructure for the United States. Wonderful. It's wonderful in that way. But the genuine thing we should be doing as insurance people is figuring out a way to help those people that are currently not helped. And it's a hard problem to solve, but it's a really old problem and hugely worthwhile. So we're really excited to be, trying to drive that change, which, there aren't a lot of people focused on it.
Well, and we'll get into this, but you have your business model to address it on one side, and then you have, I don't know if technically if it's a charitable cause, or like you have another way to also address that gap for people who are left out. And I think it's a fair point you make. And I know there are people who are like, no, those people aren't insured because they were never going to buy it anyway, or, they don't believe in it, or they're not mandated to buy it, and they don't want to spend on it, or they're just going to get in accidents, and not like they're sort of blaming the person who would be insured otherwise. Maybe. And maybe it's just, well, you've never offered a product that actually overcomes those reasons why they don't think they should get it or won't get it or can't get it or whatever. It's very easy to just blame everybody instead of saying, well, what if we serve them differently? Which I feel like is kind of your intention, is like, well, what if we gave them something that didn't lead them to say like, no, thanks.
Yeah. And I think that position of blaming prevents us from asking why.
Right.
Right. I mean, the first question is, why are they uninsured? They're driving illegally, right? Speeding ticket can land them in jail. Like, I mean, people don't do this kind of thing because it's fun.
Right.
Right. I mean, so there's more to that story. And I think what we're trying to do through Branch and through Safety Nest is bring a light here that there is a huge group of Americans who have no margin of error, and they're jailed more frequently. They tend to be highly correlated with the poverty line. They tend to also have high correlations with minorities. So there's all kinds of reasons, but I think without any data, everyone's left to assume or ignore. Both of those are damaging to society.
Yeah. It's an equity issue. It's not a they're bad people issue.
Entirely.
Yeah. So I do want to hear about Safety Nest. Joe, I want to give you some space too. And like, what's your take on this? Because that, like, this feels like the purpose, right? That thing that pulled you in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial germ of purpose for me was making a difference, especially in a large industry. Mm-hmm. And specifically and initially was very much around, we can deliver a lower price into the market because we can build a cheaper product. And that's meaningful to everyone. That helps with the inclusion or exclusion problems in insurance, but just helps everyone. And that's very exciting, especially as in my career, I've built more niche products for niche industries. Mm-hmm. And so that sense of purpose of being able to do something big on a grand scale, on a national scale, was incredibly exciting. And what was really wonderful is as we, and this is the first time in any company I've started, where we started from the beginning with some great trusted friends, advisors, branding firm, but they're sort of really feel like more of the company. We spent a lot of time being introspective about what is it that we're trying to build here. Who are we? And in my experience in other companies I've started, the culture of the company was very much something that sort of happened, and it ended up being sort of founder personalities and personalities of initial employees, and it just becomes who you are. And you can sort of try to make any set of statements on this is our culture, but like that tends not to be what it is. And I think what's been great about Branch is that from the very beginning, when it was just me and Steve, we spent a lot of time being very intentional about these are the things that we believe in, and this is how we should act. And I have acted differently, and I have a very I think everyone on the leadership team has a very strong sense of what it means to be branch-like. We constantly ask that question: is this branch-like? And that behavior and attitude and the introspection and the definition that we have done on it has led to Safety Nest. That led to the creation of Safety Nest, came directly out of that work. And how we think about Safety Nest and what we do in Safety Nest and how we think about its mission and what tactics exist to pursue that mission all come out of that same set of cultural guidelines. And it's great to have a set of principles and a set of tactics that come up all the time and that people reference all the time. And it's wonderful to have people you've hired recently and attend a meeting and hear them use those same words, even though you didn't tell them or train them directly on it. And so I think all of that is connected to purpose and mission. And I think the key piece here is that it's highly intentional. I think you have to do a lot of work on it, put a lot of time into it. And a lot of that time, you revise and you revise. I had a professor once who said there's no thinking but in writing and no writing but in rewriting. And I think that's very much the case with anything that's hard, is you really have to put in that time and effort in those rewrites.
Yeah. Well, all right. So I was going to press you on something, but we have to at least tell people what Safety Nest is, because we've talked about it enough now. So what is Safety Nest?
Ryan, Safety Nest is a 501c3 charitable organization that's chartered to combat the financial exclusion problem of uninsurance. It's not limited to a particular line of insurance, but it's focused today on the lines of insurance that branch writes, where we can help the most people and most understand the problems. We're in kind of V3 of trying to figure out how to solve this problem, but it's a long game. And my expectation is it will be a combination of awareness, regulatory change, and capital that helps us solve this problem. And it's led by Charlie Wendland, who you'll also know is the head of claims at Branch. This is a labor of love for our team. We all had set out believing in the social good that insurance provides, and knew that this was a problem, but knew we didn't exactly have an answer to solving it. And to your point earlier on the business model side, as Branch fundamentally reduces the cost of insurance, we had an original belief that lowered the barrier to access. And so there's some truth in that, right? And logic. But we did some press just recently, joint research with the Risk Institute at The Ohio State University. It's been over a decade since anyone's published any research on this population. We've been happy to help people in those moments of need when they were uninsured or underinsured, and the community was there to help.
Yeah.
We had a great example during the crazy and awful Texas freeze, where I was on Houston radio and talking about Safety Nest, and we, Safety Nest was contacted by a person that heard us and said, hey, they had this terrible issue. Their whole community pitched in to help rebuild, but she didn't have the money for the materials. And so Safety Nest made a grant, and between Safety Nest and the community, we helped this person put her life back together. I mean, it's just, it's human. And then Safety Nest is designed with financial education and resources to bring those people back into the insured population. During COVID, Safety Nest paid insurance bills when people couldn't pay them. Safety Nest paid bills to every insurance company you know. This isn't a scheme to create production for Branch. This is a mission to reduce the uninsured problem in the United States. And it's got a big, hairy, audacious goal to take it from roughly 15% to 2% uninsured over the next 30 years. So a long game, but incredibly worthwhile. And for us that are involved, I mean, I can't think of better work.
Yeah. So I remember when I put something in the book about it, I was like, I'm sure I just misunderstood. And so I wrote, like, for Branch customers, if they're underinsured or have something that isn't covered, they can reach out and ask for help. And you struck that, you're like, no, this is for anyone. I'm like, oh, this isn't just for your own customers. You are attacking the industry-wide or the national issue. So that I just figured, like, I must have misunderstood that. It must just be a thing to help the companies insureds more directly, but it doesn't matter what insurance company you're with or not. It's about helping people who are finding themselves in those moments. So that's really, it's again to purpose, right? This is the question I was going to ask before we talked about Safety Nest, and Joe, is to you. When you're facing that profound, noble purpose, and you're also, as a technologist, as an engineer, thinking about, well, how do we build the stuff that will bring this to market? Balancing those two things is really tricky, right? Because you can't build everything and expect to go live. either because you've run out of funding or it's just too complex and you can't deliver everything day one. I think we can all agree that whether you're agile or waterfall or whatever, like it's really hard. And if you scale things back too much, have you sort of killed the vision before it ever had a chance to be? And this is a common theme that comes up in a number of the cases in the book. And it was something the two of you really talked about specifically. So just kind of want to hear that balance. And Joe, for you, like not to be the angel of death in the vision here, like to be able to scale it back, but also build it in such a way that it can bloom from there and fulfill itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the short answer on all of this is that you should seek to build nothing. Now, I think if you build nothing, if you don't actually need to build anything, then you're going to be pretty easy to copy. And so that's going to play a factor. But, keep in mind, we sell insurance. We have an entire insurance product. Our insurance product team, I think in terms of full-time employees, is larger than our technology team. And so, that is a product that we create that takes effort. When I think on the technology side, every line of code you create is a liability. I think there's a real mistake in the way that technologists think about things, and actually non-technical executives often sort of think of technology as like magic and don't try to apply regular metrics to technology. And there's a lot of hoping and praying and saying everybody's rock stars and ninjas and whatnot. And I think, that's not the case. I mean, viewing the lines of code as an asset is a huge, huge mistake. Compensating people on lines of code they write is a huge mistake. You should be doing the opposite. And so I think what ends up happening is you find things you have to write because you can't buy them, and those end up being your special sauce. But I think I tend to think you're totally right. If you build it yourself, it's going to take longer. If you build it yourself and it exists out there, it's going to be worse. It's now a skill you need to have in-house. It's going to have a team of at least 4 or 5 people who are probably very highly compensated, who you will need to have all the time working on it, and you will need to understand what is good for those roles, which is going to be hard if that job is like Kubernetes, because it's going to be very hard to find it. Like, you can find people with that on their resume. Are they good at it? I don't know.
Right.
And you're never going to get rid of it. Realistically, you're not going to be able to take a position that says, we built this, and we're going to transition off it to this paid service that is now better than it, because it makes more sense. Companies don't do that. You build it, you have pride in it, you keep it forever. And so I think you have to be really maniacal about, being very clear, like, we're building this only because we can't buy it. And everyone, as soon as we find a better one out there, let's have it part of our culture that we will get rid of it and not stop doing it internally.
It's interesting because I think the build versus buy, one of the arguments for build is that it's a competitive advantage. And you said that, there are times where if you can't buy it, it doesn't exist, you build it and then it becomes a competitive advantage. But what you're saying is when it does exist, it's not a competitive advantage, it's a liability. It's holding you back, or it will hold you back soon enough, because that provider is solving it for everyone in lots of different situations and has to, or they don't get to exist. Whereas you're only solving it for your needs. So you're never going to learn from all the other things that could have inspired greater capability at lower cost, at, faster throughput, like, et cetera. I think it's a really hard thing for people to get in that moment.
Oh, I mean, there are so many companies that take such pride, and it's difficult as a technologist to not say, I want to build, because that's highly motivating and it's fun and it's why people get into the profession.
Yeah.
And there's another huge issue that exists, which is most technology leaders, there's no continuing education in technology. I don't know if you knew this, but there is none. So what it means is all of your technological leaders are 10 to 20 years out of actually building things. And I probably don't have to tell you this, but every 18 to 24 months, really substantial innovations are made in technology to make it a lot easier. New services come out, it's a lot easier to do things. And so when your leadership is decades out of knowing what's the latest, and there's no mechanism for them to learn new things, you will find lots of companies building a lot of things they could have bought and spending. It's the opposite of cheaper, faster, better, right? If you buy it, it's cheaper, faster, better. If you don't, it's the opposite of all three of them.
No, I think that's really fair. And even looking at when you're saying like early on, it was just the two of you. Steve, you made a point about the pride of like your team was incredibly small for a very long time. It's still, relatively speaking, looking at the size of your business to the team size, you are an outlier. And people might say like, oh, they're overworking their people and they're just, making them all take on too much. And like every startup everyone's overworked. Like that's not news, but it's not just about we've put 3 times the work on everyone and we're slave masters. It's like, it's part of the ethos of what did you build? What did you buy? What can you get support with? Do you really need to think of it that way? And then even just like the space people have to have a meaningful role, it just sounded so purposeful. And then you look at the outcome. I just love to hear some more about the people side of it.
Yeah, well, and Brian, it's all reinforced. It's all from the mission, right? We chose Columbus, Ohio, in part because of its cost profile, right? By building fewer things, we can be more efficient, which means we can have a less expensive price for insurance, right? All of these things, the wonderful thing about having a mission at all is it's aligning, and it's gives priority to how you think about, which decisions you'll make and which bodies of work you'll undertake. But I think on the people side, before we had gotten to market, we had only raised a seed, which at the time was like 1/10 of what was normally raised before someone got to market. And then we stretched that seed all the way to filing 5 states and 4 lines of insurance. It was incredibly cost effective relative to what other people were doing. And we took a lot of pride in that. Back to Joe's point about people taking a lot of pride in lines of code, people take a lot of pride in how much they've raised. Absolutely. And in how many employees they have.
Yeah.
Right. These again are not marks of progress by themselves. And so we had built, we were able to do that partially because we had real expertise. We knew how to build an insurance program. We knew the functions of an insurance company. And so we didn't have to staff ahead of building things we didn't know how to do because we knew how to do them. That allowed us to be quite lean. We also had a great network of, essentially family and friends. I was getting texts when we first started up from folks I'm sure you probably know that are well-known in the insurance space saying, hey, if I can help, like, let me know how I can help. And we had, a lot of people coming together because we were trying to do something good. And we had, built in both of our careers, in a way that, we did good things for people generally, and people look to pay that back and pay that forward. But as we then started to build in market, we were essentially running all aspects of an insurance company as an MGA, but we had taken like a hyper proportion of the responsibilities delegated. And, at the time, I think when we went live, we had 7 employees, which was kind of astounding.
How many, just for people who don't get that, like, think about how many insurance companies have 7 employees. And granted, you were an MGA, but your front didn't really work in those lines. So you guys were doing more than an MGA would typically do in the lines you launched with.
Well, and for further context, when we became a full stack insurance company and we're live as an MGA in some states and a full stack insurance company in others, which makes it extra complex.
Yeah.
I want to say that we were still sub 30 employees, 20s, something in the 20s. So yeah, and that said, we also, part of the benefit of not being in the Bay, I think too, is there is a mentality of if you're not working 100 hours, if you're not in the chair all the time, you must just not believe. And this is what it's going to take to get it done. And we didn't really have that mentality. Actually, from my experience, having 1,500 person organizations, I'm pretty sure that working your employees 100 hours a week for an extended period of time, that's you poor productivity over, at all in that. And so, we built a company culture around our brand, as I said before, and our brand narrative is always punchlined in branches getting back to getting each other's backs, which we believe is all you should want from your insurance company, right? There's a lot of uncertainty that insurance can solve for. Just let me know I'm taken care of, like be there for me. And we wanted to really live that. And so we have an entire employee people program, benefits and all built around, well, what would it mean to get each other's backs here? And I firmly believe that a huge part of our 4.9 star Google reviews is that it's easy for our employees to serve our members that way, because that's how they're thought of, right? They're empowered to do what's right. There are constraints which help us innovate, but we've built the people side around that, and then we were very purposeful in giving some structure, some guardrails. How do you think about what it means to be at branch so people could self-select in?
Yeah.
And the people that didn't identify with that value structure could, we'd help them find something else, and we'd celebrate what they achieved here, because that's part of what we think it means to get their backs as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. It just keeps coming back to the purpose point. And now I'm like the 4.9, a lot of my work when I was in the InsurTech side was talking about customer sat, and Google was typically, that was going to be the lowest score you would have on any kind of site. Maybe Yelp would be similar if insurance got reviewed there, but like Clear Assurance would be a little higher. But Google seemed to be high ones, low twos for most insurers. A 4.9 is insane. That's insane.
Yeah, Brian, I think what's been funny about it is because so many of our customers have bought insurance before, the expectation is set. And so like there's this much room to exceed an expectation. And so like it's something I hadn't totally anticipated is it's the combination of everything, right? Happiness is a lot of times just the difference between what you expected and what you got.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of room to blow people's minds in a good way, because everything that shouldn't take a lot of your time doesn't take a lot of time. And then our team really wants to be there for you, right? We don't see ourselves as the deity that saves you when you have something bad happen. We're the facilitator of a community, because that's how insurance works. We pool these small resources so that the unfortunate of us can take a big chunk when we need it. And like, if we do a bad job facilitating and we pay a lot of fraudulent claims, then it's the community's capital that has to solve that problem. That's the sacred art for us, is how do we facilitate that community so that they have to spend the least effort and can have exactly what they need and spend the least money, right? That we think is the perfect insurance business.
Yeah. If there's such a thing as insurance goosebumps, that's what I'm getting right now.
Yeah, they exist.
I want to wrap things up in respect of everyone's time, but I'm just curious, looking forward, like, where do you think things are going for the industry? And is this, people need to read the book to get the reference, but is this the 1950s homeowners insurance moment again, where everything is about to shift and you guys are the equivalent of INA? Do you think that's possible? What do you think is going to happen to the industry?
Joe, you want to start this one?
No, I think you should answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, I think it is. I think the reason it is because technology is going to enable us to take more fat out of the product. It allows us to rethink every aspect of the business. And I think what's wrong with insurance in its current generation is that it's necessarily heavier than the design, actually, like, so many of the early mutuals were entirely referral distributed. Yeah. And so, like, it was much more efficient and actually less expensive, on a kind of comparative basis. And, like, technology allows us to recreate some of those alignments and some of those old distribution models or new distribution models that allow us to take, 15 to 30% out of the cost of insurance. And that will ultimately win, right? I mean, and I think that's why we're at an inflection point. I think there's a lot of interesting things out there in InsurTech, but I also believe that because of the inherent complexity of insurance, which is not just the experience, right? It's the entirety of what led to the experience: regulatory, consumer perception, financial education, and then the product, and then the experience and the tech that supports it and everything else, that you can't just choose to be an agent. You can't choose just to be an insurance company. You have to approach this with the lens of what will the customer's outcome be? And what was it that was substandard, suboptimal about that experience? And I think where that's led Branch anyway is to this feeling that the second largest cost in what you pay for insurance, which is acquisition, has become an evil, a pox on society. I mean, we're talking about, like, between home and auto insurance, we're talking about almost $80 billion a year spent on acquisition.
Yeah.
I know the customer doesn't want to spend it. Yeah. I know the insurance companies don't want to spend it. So the people that are making all this money have the least skin in this arrangement. And I think technology will allow us to change that, not just acquisition. There's other efficiencies to be gained. But I think it leads to this place that doesn't look a lot like today.
Yeah. Yeah, you talked about a nuclear arms race of advertising. And
I do think...
Yeah. Hey, Joe, go ahead.
Sorry. I do think that it's important to recognize that, because we're talking about technology, and I agree. I think that it is software, it is automation, it is the internet, it is the smartphone, it is a customer base or a series of people who buy insurance who are very comfortable with doing things on the internet, on their phones. All those are true. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that if it were easy, if it were just, do this one thing or this one thing and this one thing, hire this set of people, create this department, copy this thing that this internet startup does. If it were possible to affect the change that Steve is talking about with that, it would have been done already. This has largely not happened. In terms of actually changing the cost structure, which, as we talked about at the beginning, is the primary thing that people want, right? In the magic wand question, they want their insurance to be cheaper. They're required to buy it and they would like it to be cheaper. And so I think it's important to acknowledge we are at a local maximum of a type or at least every company that's existing that has a solid customer base is at essentially a local maximum for who they are. And in order to hit a Pareto optimal outcome, there is a far distance to travel. There is a lot of pain to go through. And this is one of the reasons why being able to start not just clean paper, but sort of clean org chart, right? We don't have all of these divisions of existing tech, right, that we talked about before, but being able to, with some knowledge and understanding of how the industry works, but being able to start over with the structure that is actually targeted at that Pareto optimal point to achieve that lower price structurally. That's the magic and the opportunity that, Steve came to me with, quite a few years ago, and what I think will change the industry here. But it is hard, and it is not one thing or two things, right? And I think that's the important thing to acknowledge.
Yeah, that's well said. I want to wrap things up. Steve, I don't know if you were about to jump in with something, because I don't want to cut off Brilliance if you're about to share something.
Well, it certainly wasn't that.
Well, we'll just assume it was amazing.
I probably was just going to say, go get the book. And thanks again for bringing our story to life, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Well, that's perfect. Yeah, go get the book. But thank you, the two of you, for the time that you put into this and the mission that you're on. Again, it is super important. It is really noble. And you're trying to solve a really big problem from a variety of angles. And I appreciate that, because that's why this industry should exist in the first place. So Joe, Steve, and to the entire team at Branch, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Purpose, right? Purpose, noble cause. These are really strong words. It's awesome to hear somebody or some people talking about that in the context of insurance. That's why I do the work I do. That's why this industry exists in my mind. And it's really exciting to see that genesis behind Branch, the way that it's drawn people in, the mission that they're on with their insurance solution, but also with Safety Nest, the way that they're trying to tackle the problem of people not having coverage, not having sufficient coverage, much more broadly across the market from different angles. So kudos to Joe and to Steve for what they're building and for the success that they've had. I'm really honored to get to bring more depth in their story than you got here in the book, The Future of Insurance, Volume 2. The startups, you do have to check that out. Branch is in there along with 7 other startup companies, sharing their stories, their journeys, the ups and downs, the things that led to their founding, to the pivots, to the lessons that they learned, some good, some from tougher situations. And it's just really insightful and inspiring and can help you and others in the industry regardless of the situation you're in. So I hope that you pick that up. And a big thank you to Joe and Steve for doing the interview today, but the hours that they gave to bring their story into the book, and to their whole team who gave a lot of themselves directly or just by allowing Joe and Steve to give up their time to spend some time with me so I can put something in your hands. So thank you to everyone at Branch. I hope this has been valuable. If you think it has, please do head over to whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. If you're listening in audio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., leave a review. It makes a huge difference in the way that those platforms then help others to discover shows. So if you have the time and the kindness to leave a nice 5-star review, some kind words, some inspiration, I do read those. So let me know what you think of the show. Share it on there. And if you're on YouTube watching this right now, throw up a like, leave a comment. It matters. I take that stuff really seriously. If there's something you think we can do better, if you like what's going on, if something really stood out to you, by all means, let me know. It helps tremendously. So thank you to everyone. And please, not just rate and review, but if you can, subscribe so you don't miss another episode, because I have a lot of these coming with leaders and thought leaders from around the industry. Really, really valuable conversations. So with that, I will let you guys go. Thank you to the team at Branch. Thank you to Medallia for making this episode possible through their sponsorship. And thank you to you for listening, taking in these messages, and thinking about how we can find that purpose in the noble cause of this industry to help protect people and put their lives back together. So with that, I'll let you go. Have a great day, and I will bring you more inspiring, insightful leadership and thinking in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.